We're talking about in chapter 8 what the Apostle Paul hinted at and introduced in chapter 7. The first thing he says about the newness of life, he says the newness of life is a life without condemnation. It's a life free from a guilty conscience. There is no condemnation for those who are, he says, in Christ Jesus. When you've had the justification that he mentions in chapter 5, and he says, now we have peace with God, that's what the peace looks like. It looks like no more condemnation. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death. Something happened in Jesus that set you free from the old pattern that he has just described in 6 and 7. That is law, sin, and death. He says, for what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did. So when he says the law of the Spirit of life in Christ, that's not a different law. That's not a law I live by. That's God at work in the life of the believer by the Spirit. Sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh and as an offering for sin, that is the way in which God did it. How did God set us free? He set us free by sending his Son in the likeness of sinful flesh and as an offering for sin. He condemned sin in the flesh so that the requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Here's what the Apostle Paul is just saying. When I get saved, at that moment, there would be no condemnation for any of us who are in Christ Jesus. And Jesus came in order that, or so that, the requirements of the law will be fulfilled in me.